you're going to be provided with a flask with some sodium hydroxide on it. The approximate concentration is written on the flask, but you'll need to look at the board for the actual concentration to use in your calculations. It will be the same concentration for each of your trials of the sodium hydroxide. Before you begin, you can assume that your buret is clean enough that you don't need to use distilled water, but you're going to use a small amount of the sodium hydroxide to rinse out any potential contaminants that are in there. Place a funnel in the top of the buret and then just put a few milliliters from your flask into the buret. Now before you pour, you're going to want to make sure that that stopcock is closed. It needs to be horizontal. It's best to do this over a sink. Then you will remove the funnel and tip the buret back and forth a little bit, turning it as you do so that you can rinse out the length of the buret. After you do this, drain a little bit into the sink and then dump the rest out so that you can fill it with fresh sodium hydroxide. Before you begin, you're going to need to fill your buret. Once you have filled it with the funnel, you need to remove the funnel from the top so that you don't have continuing liquid dripping down and changing your volume. Make sure that your volume is between 0 and 10 milliliters so that you have plenty of liquid to use for your titration. Before you begin the titration, you're going to need to make sure there are no air bubbles. Check the buret itself and the bottom. Notice that there is an air bubble. The presence or absence of an air bubble can change the measurement that we have on our buret. So we want to make sure before we start that the air bubble is gone. Take one of the small beakers from your drawer, place it underneath the buret, and then open the valve for just a second to make sure all the bubbles come out. Check again to make sure that you're still above the 10 milliliter mark before you proceed. You only need to use a little bit of this sodium hydroxide in order to clear out the bubble. Make sure you don't do this into your flask. Burets can be difficult to read, so you may need to adjust the height so that the level of the solution inside is at eye level for you. Depending on whether the markings on the buret are black, white, or some other color, you may want to have a background that contrasts so that you can easily read. I find it helpful to get the lines that go all the way around the buret to overlap with one another to know that I am looking at the measurement straight on. Remember to read at the bottom of the meniscus, and remember that the numbers go from low numbers at the top to high numbers at the bottom. Record the measurement in your lab manual to 2 decimal places. We can reuse the same flask that we did for other parts of this lab. Be sure to rinse them thoroughly with deionized water, as tap water may have minerals that will change the acidity. For the vinegar, because it is a liquid, we're going to pipette an exact amount, 5 milliliters. We never pipette directly from the container because we might end up getting some contamination back into the container, ruining it for the rest of the experiments. So we pour a small amount into a beaker and then pipette from there. Be sure to place the pipette in the beaker, but don't let it sit on the bottom, as that will make it difficult for the liquid to travel up. Before you use the pipette bulb, squeeze it slightly and then let it rest on the top. Don't shove it down really hard because that will make it be difficult to remove when you're trying to adjust the volume. I'm going to lift this slightly off of the bottom and let the liquid come up. Once the bulb is completely released, I still don't quite have enough vinegar. I'm going to quickly lift the bulb and then replace it while squeezing down before I replace it. Now I can have it come up just above the line marking the 5 milliliters. I will remove the bulb and replace it quickly with my thumb. Once you have added the deionized water to the vinegar, now you're ready to begin your titration. You're going to use the flask that you pipetted the vinegar into. You can place it directly underneath your buret, and you're going to use phenolphthalein. Everyone should have their own bottle of phenolphthalein. You just need a couple of drops. It's okay if you use 2, it's okay if you use 5. The phenolphthalein doesn't change the color of the vinegar, but you will find that once enough base is added, it's going to change your solution to pink. As you are titrating, you'll notice that the solution will start to turn pink. Stop every few milliliters and swirl so that the color goes away. As you get close to the endpoint, you'll notice that the pink lasts a little bit longer. When it's hard for it to disappear and turn colorless, you're going to want to slow your additions down to a few squirts or just a few drops at a time. When we get very close to the endpoint, just one drop will cause a pink color to persist. Now this is very, very slightly pink, but I want it to persist for at least 30 seconds, so I'm going to add another drop. Because I am so close here, what I might want to do is go ahead and write down the volume that I have on my buret just in case I overshoot and add too many drops at the same time. And then I can change that volume if the next color that I get for one drop still looks good. I'm going to hold this up. You can see that that's a very pale pink. Because phenolphthalein doesn't turn pink until it's well past the pH of 7, if it's pink at all, it really is pink enough, but it needs to persist in order for you to call it good. So if you write down the number and then notice that it's gone back to colorless, go ahead and add another drop and then re-record your number. Make sure that you record the color of your solution in addition to the volumes that you use. In this way, if you have one that seems off, you can compare the colors that you were looking at to determine if that might be a reason why you have different numbers. You're going to repeat this for 3 trials. Ask your instructor if one of your trials seems to be off, and they may have you do a 4th trial. You can empty your waste beaker, and in fact all of the waste from this lab, into the sink.